I always believed that aging quietly was a privilege. At 72, I had accepted my aching joints, my slower steps, my softer voice, but never once did I accept the idea that I was helpless. Unfortunately, my daughter-in-law Claire assumed otherwise. She treated my age like a flaw, a weakness she could exploit and joke about. I ignored the small comments at first, telling myself she was immature, stressed, or simply unaware of her tone. But disrespect grows when it isn't corrected, and Claire's disrespect became a daily ritual. It started with snide remarks disguised as concern. "She forgets everything," Claire would say with a laugh when I misplaced my glasses. "She gets confused," she'd add if I asked her to repeat herself. She said it to neighbors, delivery men, nurses, even strangers on the phone, as if advertising my supposed senility made her feel smarter. Ethan, my son, rarely noticed. He worked long hours, exhausted by the time he walked through the door, and Claire knew exactly how to manipulate that exhaustion. She acted sweet in front of him, always smiling, always helpful. Behind his back, she rolled her eyes, sighed dramatically, and whispered insults she assumed I wouldn't hear. One afternoon, everything changed. I was sitting at the kitchen table, slowly cutting fruit for dessert. My hands trembled slightly, arthritis, nothing more, and the house was unusually quiet. Claire thought I had gone upstairs for a nap. I didn't know she had slipped into the dining room to talk on speakerphone. Her voice carried through the hallway, sharp and amused. "She's too senile to notice," Claire said, laughing. "Honestly, it's like babysitting a toddler with gray hair. I'm telling you, this house will be ours sooner than you think." My hand froze mid-slice. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. She continued, completely confident that I was out of earshot. "Ethan's so busy, he'll sign anything I put in front of him. I already forged her signature on half the paperwork. The nursing home is just a matter of timing." Forged my signature. A nursing home. My house, the home I had lived in for 40 years. Every word hit me like a slap. I felt something cold slide down my spine, not fear, not anger, clarity. A sharp, steady clarity I hadn't felt in years. She thought I was senile? Then fine. Let her believe that. It was the perfect disguise. The only mask that would make her careless enough to expose herself. From that moment, I became silent on purpose. I let my movements slow. I pretended I didn't hear things. I asked her to repeat instructions. When I dropped a spoon, I let her think it was weakness, not strategy. She smirked every time I played the role she assigned me, and every smirk gave me strength. She had no idea that while I appeared confused, I was listening more carefully than ever in my life. It didn't take long for her arrogance to reveal the truth. Over the next few weeks, she spoke more boldly, thinking I couldn't understand. She whispered to friends about finally getting rid of the old woman. She bragged about changing my mail address behind my back. She made jokes about selling my jewelry, claiming Ethan would never notice. She even practiced my signature in the kitchen late at night, not realizing I was awake upstairs hearing every stroke of her pen. But listening was not enough. I needed proof. So, one morning when they were both out, I moved slowly, always slowly, into Claire's office. I didn't search wildly, I looked exactly where a sloppy, overconfident person would hide things. The top drawer of her desk. The side pocket of her purse. The documents folder on her laptop. What I found confirmed everything I feared: loan applications in my name, nursing home admission forms, real estate documents half filled with forged signatures, all dated recently. My heart clenched, but not with fear, with power. I took photos of everything. Carefully. Quietly. I emailed them to myself, then printed a copy and hid it inside one of my old cookbooks. The lemon pie recipe, she'd never touched that one. She didn't even like cooking. Next, I contacted someone who knew how to help. Not a friend. Not family. A professional. A legal investigator named Grant who specialized in elder fraud. I explained the situation, keeping my voice soft and steady. He listened, surprised at my clarity, at the amount of evidence I had already gathered. "You're not senile at all," he said. I smiled. "No. But don't tell my daughter-in-law that." He advised me to continue pretending until we had enough proof to confront everything at once: forged signatures, attempted financial theft, emotional abuse, coercion, unauthorized credit accounts, and housing manipulation. Every crime was serious on its own. Together, they formed a case Claire could not talk her way out of. And so I played the role she handed me. I fumbled with buttons. I pretended to misunderstand instructions. I let her think she was winning. Meanwhile, Grant helped me gather more evidence silently: calls recorded legally, documents reviewed and notarized, timelines established. Every time Claire laughed at me, another piece of her downfall slid neatly into place. The hardest part wasn't fear or anger. It was watching my son, my only child, defend a woman who was planning to destroy me. But even that pain became fuel. I reminded myself I wasn't fighting just for my house or my dignity. I was fighting for him too. For the son I had raised with love, the son who had disappeared behind Claire's manipulation. I knew that once the truth came out, I wouldn't just reclaim my life. I'd reclaim him too. And deep down, I knew something else with absolute certainty. Claire believed she was clever. She believed she was winning. She believed I was weak. She had no idea the storm that was coming. Because I wasn't senile. I was watching. And I was finally ready to strike. For the next several weeks, I lived inside a role I created for myself, a role Claire believed she had cast me in. I became the forgetful old woman she mocked behind closed doors. I let her see trembling hands, slow responses, misplaced items, and questions I already knew the answers to. Every time she sighed dramatically as if inconvenienced by my existence, I reminded myself that I wasn't losing dignity, I was collecting ammunition. Claire, in her arrogance, interpreted my silence as surrender. She began moving through my house like she owned it. She barked instructions, rearranged furniture, controlled the mail, monitored my medication bottles, and inserted herself into my doctor's appointments. I watched all of it without resistance, letting her dig her own grave one insult at a time. She thought she was untouchable. She believed Ethan would never doubt her. She assumed I was too weak to fight back. Her confidence was my greatest advantage. She started small at first. She hid my personal letters and replaced them with pamphlets for assisted living centers. When I asked about missing mail, she feigned surprise and made jokes about how a memory goes fast at your age. But the truth was simple: she had redirected half of my important correspondence to her private P.O. box. She thought I didn't notice. I noticed everything. One morning, I accidentally overheard her whispering on the phone in the laundry room, her voice frantic and irritated. "No, we can't do final signatures yet. She's still living here. I told you I'm handling it. She'll be out by next month." Out. As if I were an unwanted guest in my own home. I stood in the hallway quietly, appearing confused when she noticed me, letting her think I had wandered off track. She rolled her eyes, muttered something about useless elderly people, and swept past me with her phone tucked against her shoulder. I floated through the house slowly, letting her believe I was truly lost in my own world, while Grant, the investigator, built a case strong enough to snap her entire future in half. As days turned into weeks, Claire's behavior escalated. She stopped hiding things. She called nursing homes directly while standing in the living room. She complained loudly about being stuck babysitting a decaying senior. She even bragged to her sister on the phone that she would soon have full access to the house papers once she got the old woman out of the way. Her mask wasn't slipping. She was proudly taking it off. I realized quickly that she wasn't just manipulative, she was greedy. Greedy enough to risk everything. Greedy enough to believe she could outsmart the world. Greedy enough to assume Ethan's loyalty was absolute, that he would never question her authority. She forgot one crucial detail. Ethan was my son. Blood of my blood. The boy I raised to be fair, kind, and strong. He was not lost, only blinded. And blindness can be healed with truth. Meanwhile, Claire grew bolder. She entered my bedroom without knocking. She rummaged through my drawers under the guise of helping me stay organized. She moved my valuables into her closet. She took pictures of my jewelry. She even wrote notes to herself about which items she'd sell first. Each violation stung, but each one was evidence. One evening, when Ethan returned home late from work, she greeted him at the door with exaggerated exhaustion. "I spent the entire day caring for your mother," she complained. "She nearly started a fire. She can't be left alone anymore." A fire? I had boiled water for tea. That was all. But Ethan, tired and trusting, nodded with concern. He kissed her forehead, thanked her for looking after me, and promised they would figure things out. He didn't know she had coached herself in front of the mirror earlier that day, rehearsing the perfect victim tone. I watched from the staircase, my hand gripping the railing not from weakness, but from the effort it took not to expose everything too soon. Claire's frustration grew whenever I didn't give her the dramatic Senile episode she wanted to report. So she manufactured them. She loosened the lids on containers and claimed I spilled things. She rearranged items, then insisted I'd misplaced them. She twisted stories before Ethan walked through the door. But for every lie she fed him, I fed evidence to Grant. The more she tried to frame me as incompetent, the more capable I became behind the scenes. I organized documents. I labeled evidence. I kept records of her behavior. I watched her downfall assemble itself piece by piece, like a puzzle she didn't realize she was building. One afternoon, she stormed into the kitchen waving a stack of papers. "You forgot to pay these bills," she snapped. I didn't respond. I simply watched her, letting her temper flare naturally. A guilty person always reveals more when angry. "These late fees are ridiculous," she hissed, shaking the papers. "Ethan and I shouldn't have to fix all your mistakes." But when she slammed them onto the table, her carelessness exposed the truth: the bills were not mine. They were hers. Overdue credit card statements under her name and mine, using my identity to obtain new accounts. Her hands shook slightly, but she recovered quickly, pulling them away before I could accidentally notice the details. Too late. I had seen everything I needed. It was becoming reckless, it's desperate even. She filed nursing home applications using a forged version of my handwriting. She scanned my old signatures off greeting cards and practiced them at night. She even swiped an envelope from my tax documents to copy the signature I had used 6 years ago. But arrogance makes criminals sloppy. Especially criminals who believe their victim is weak. Ethan still didn't know, but not because I doubted him. I wanted the confrontation to happen with everything laid bare, every signature, every recording, every document dated and labeled, every motive exposed so completely that there would be no room for excuses. No space for manipulation. No way for Claire to twist the narrative into a sob story. I wanted Ethan to see the truth without shadows or confusion. I wanted him to learn, in one brutal moment, who his wife really was. So I waited. I listened. I watched. And each day Claire's confidence grew, so did her carelessness. She gossiped too loudly. She bragged too openly. She crossed lines she believed I was too frail to recognize. She thought she was winning. She thought she had already secured the future she wanted: the house, the money, the control, the authority. She didn't realize she was walking straight into a trap she built with her own hands. Because I didn't need strength to defeat her. I only needed patience. And the one advantage she could never take from me. I had survived more in my life than she could even imagine. I knew how to endure. I knew how to outlast storms. And I knew exactly how to strike when the time was right. She underestimated the wrong old woman. I learned something important during those weeks of observation: a person who believes they've already won becomes greedy. Claire was no exception. The more convinced she became that I was slipping into helplessness, the faster she pushed her plans forward. Her impatience was almost breathtaking to watch. She wanted everything, the house, my savings, my authority, my silence, and she wanted it quickly. But greed makes people reckless, and reckless people expose themselves. Grant, the investigator, advised me to document everything, and I did. I kept a small notebook tucked inside my knitting basket, a place Claire never bothered to look because she had no interest in anything she considered old lady hobbies. Every time she made a phone call, every complaint she exaggerated to Ethan, every forged paper she printed, every whisper she thought I didn't hear, I noted it down with dates and times. I wasn't gathering revenge, I was building truth. And truth, once organized, becomes undeniable. One afternoon, while cleaning the hallway closet, slowly, pretending to be confused about where the coats belonged, I found an opened letter shoved behind a stack of towels. It was addressed to me but had Claire's handwriting on the torn flap. Inside was a credit card statement for an account I'd never opened, full of charges clearly made by her. Designer clothes. Spa packages. Restaurant meals. Uber rides. A hotel room I didn't want to think about. She wasn't just trying to steal my house. She was already living off my identity. I folded the paper neatly and tucked it into my cardigan pocket, resisting the urge to confront her. Confrontation gives a person the chance to lie, twist, repair, or hide. Silence gives them the space to continue revealing themselves naturally. I preferred the latter. That evening, she walked into the kitchen just as Ethan arrived home. She put on her well-practiced exhausted face, hair slightly tousled for dramatic effect, and clutched her lower back as if caring for me had physically damaged her. "Your mother almost fell today," she told him, shaking her head with exaggerated worry. "I don't know how much longer I can do this alone." Almost fell? I had simply reached for a glass of water. Ethan looked at me with concern, real worry, and asked if I was okay. I smiled serenely and patted his hand, pretending not to notice Claire's calculating eyes watching every movement. She wanted him to see me as fragile, incompetent, a burden. That was the story she was selling, and she wanted him to buy it without hesitation. But something changed that night. Ethan lingered longer than usual near the kitchen counter while Claire talked. He looked tired, not exhausted from work, but exhausted from confusion. His responses were shorter, his eyes less certain, as though doubt had begun creeping in quietly, searching for cracks in Claire's narrative. It was small, subtle, barely noticeable. But I noticed. Doubt is a seed. Once planted, it grows. The next sign came 2 days later. Claire walked into my room without knocking, holding a stack of financial documents clipped together. She waved them in front of me with an annoyed sigh. "You forgot to sign these last week," she said sharply. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I stared at the papers long enough for her to become impatient. She shoved them into my hands. Among them was a form giving her full access to my accounts, disguised as a harmless medical authorization document. The handwriting she forged was getting bolder. But her biggest mistake wasn't the forgery. It was her assumption that I couldn't recognize the trap. I took the papers, pretending to struggle with understanding them, letting her impatience flare. She snapped at me for being slow, repeated instructions in the same condescending tone one might use with a child, and stormed out when I didn't produce the signature she wanted within her preferred timeline. As soon as she left, I photographed everything and sent it to Grant. He called me immediately. "This is more serious than I thought," he said. "She's not just preparing for fraud. She's already deep into it." I knew. I had known for weeks. But hearing it from a professional made the situation feel heavier, and somehow clearer. I wasn't merely preventing her from stealing my house. I was preventing her from destroying everything I had built across my lifetime. And still, I stayed silent. Because sometimes silence is not weakness. Sometimes it is the loudest, sharpest strategy. Meanwhile, Claire's behavior at home became increasingly erratic. The more pressure she felt, pressure she didn't know came from me, the more unstable she became. She'd stomp around the house muttering under her breath. She'd slam cabinet doors. She'd whisper arguments through her phone about deadlines, and documents and someone slowing everything down. Greed was eating her alive, and she blamed me for her lack of progress. One night, when she thought I was asleep, I heard her hiss at someone on the phone, "She needs to be out before the refinancing date. If she stays longer, everything falls apart." Out. The word echoed in my chest. She genuinely believed she could erase me, physically, emotionally, legally, before the world even realized what she had done. But cracks were forming everywhere. Ethan's eyes lingered on me more often. He asked me simple questions, perhaps trying to test whether my mind was as fragile as Claire claimed. He watched Claire more closely. He paused at odd moments, as if replaying conversations in his head. He wasn't suspicious yet, but he was thinking. And thinking is the first step toward truth. Then something happened that made Claire panic. Ethan took a day off work. She hadn't expected that. She hovered around him all morning, talking fast, over-explaining, nervously redirecting every small concern. She didn't want him near me for too long. She kept pulling him into different rooms, distracting him with household chores he didn't ask for. But children, even grown ones, know their parents better than they realize. When she stepped outside to take a phone call, Ethan sat beside me quietly. "You okay, Mom?" he asked softly. I nodded, giving a warm smile. But his eyes lingered. Searching. Questioning. Wondering. He didn't know the truth yet, but he felt it. Instinct is powerful, and his instincts were finally waking up. Claire returned moments later, rushing to interrupt whatever connection was forming between us. She talked loudly, filling the air with exaggerated concern. She positioned herself physically between us. She directed Ethan's attention toward chores and errands and anything that kept him away from me. All signs of a guilty mind unraveling. That evening, as she complained loudly in the other room, I sat in my bed awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. Not because I was worried, but because I could feel it. The shift. The unraveling. The beginning of her downfall. She didn't know Ethan was already questioning things. She didn't know I had piles of evidence hidden away. She didn't know Grant was preparing a full report. She didn't know her biggest weapon, my supposed senility, was nothing but a mask I wore deliberately. She didn't know anything. And that was the most dangerous thing in the world for her. Because when someone underestimates you long enough, you learn exactly how to defeat them. And Claire had underestimated me completely. By the time the fourth week arrived, something in the atmosphere of the house had changed. You could feel it the way you can feel a storm before it hits, the heaviness in the air, the restless silence, the tension caught between breaths. Claire was unraveling. Her steps were sharper, her voice more brittle, her temper shorter. The smallest inconvenience sent her spiraling into muttering fits, and the smallest success made her unnervingly smug. She was riding a thin line between triumph and panic, convinced she was inches from securing everything she wanted, yet irritated that I, in her mind, the senile old woman, wasn't disappearing fast enough. Her impatience was turning into danger. Almost daily now, she tried new tactics to make me seem incapable. She left the stove lit and then blamed me. She moved my medication into a different cabinet and accused me of being forgetful. She unplugged the landline phone and claimed I must have fiddled with it again. She created problems, blamed me, then presented herself as the exhausted caretaker holding everything together. But the more she pushed, the more unstable she became, and the more obvious her manipulation grew to anyone who bothered to watch closely. Ethan had begun watching. Not openly. Not confrontationally. But his eyes lingered. He listened more. He walked slower when Claire complained, as if he wasn't sure what to believe. He asked subtle questions, innocent on the surface, but loaded with curiosity. He noticed the sharpness in her tone and the softness in mine. He began paying attention to details he had overlooked before. This shift frightened Claire. And fear made her reckless. One morning, while Ethan was at work, she entered my room again without warning. Her face was tight, her jaw clenched. She held a stack of documents pressed tightly against her chest, fingers gripping the edges, as if afraid they might fly away. "We're behind schedule," she muttered to herself. "This has to get done." Behind schedule. Her timeline was falling apart, and she knew it. She handed me a pen and thrust the papers toward me. They were financial releases, power of attorney forms, and an authorization to transfer property rights temporarily. She claimed they were medical documents. She mispronounced half the terms, but she didn't care. She wanted a signature. She wanted it now. I stared at the papers long enough to frustrate her. My silence made her twitchy. She paced the room, tapping her nails against the dresser, muttering about deadlines, consequences, and people waiting on her. I didn't sign. I set the pen down softly. She snapped. Her voice rose, sharp and angry, the kind of voice that strips away all the fake sweetness she kept for Ethan. She accused me of being stubborn. She accused me of being ungrateful. She accused me of ruining everything. She didn't realize that every emotional crack widened the trail of evidence against her. When she finally stormed out of the room, the papers trembling in her hands, I closed the door gently behind her and exhaled. The mask was slipping faster than she could fix it. That afternoon, Claire did something that confirmed everything Grant had warned me about. She called a nursing home. Not just any nursing home, the one she had been planning behind my back for months. I heard her in the kitchen, speaking with confident authority, giving false medical information and claiming the admissions paperwork was almost finalized. She told them I was confused, declining, and no longer capable of independent living. She exaggerated symptoms, invented behaviors, and pretended to be the guardian she had not yet legally stolen the rights to be. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. Move-in date? Yes, next Friday works. No, she won't resist. She barely knows what day it is. Next Friday. She was planning to remove me from my own home in 7 days. The timeline she had been preparing was real. The pressure she was under was real. The danger was real. And suddenly, the pieces fit together, the forced confusion, the missing mail, the forged signatures, the impatience, the anger, the frantic phone calls, the lies she fed Ethan. She wasn't preparing for fraud anymore. She was executing it. Grant called that evening with updates. His voice was firm but controlled. The case was nearly complete. We had everything we needed, forged documents, recordings of her insults, photos of her misuse of my information, timestamps of her calls, her attempts to frame me as incompetent. He told me the next step was the confrontation, but it had to be done carefully. No shouting. No shock tactics. No accusations she could slip away from. We needed control, timing, and witnesses. So he advised something bold. Let her think she had one for one more day. One more day of arrogance. One more day of overconfidence. One more day of lies she thought were invisible. The plan was simple. When Ethan returned from work the next evening, I would give him the evidence folder, the one I had built quietly, page by page, while pretending not to understand anything. The folder that contained her downfall. The folder that contained her future. The night before the confrontation felt long. I sat quietly in my room, looking through the house I spent decades building. Every wall held memories. Every chair held stories. Every corner felt like a reminder of the life I had lived, and the life Claire tried to take from me. But I wasn't sad. I wasn't frightened. I wasn't weak. I felt steady. Stronger than I had in years. More certain than ever. Because justice isn't loud. It's patient. When the next evening arrived, Ethan walked through the front door with tired eyes, briefcase in hand, shoulders heavy. Claire rushed to him immediately, clinging to his arm, pouring out dramatized stories about my forgetfulness, exaggerating incidents that never happened, insisting I was getting worse. She spoke quickly, almost manically, as if she feared his attention slipping away from her. But Ethan barely responded. He simply nodded and murmured, his focus drifting toward me. I sat in the living room, hands folded, posture straight, completely calm. He noticed. His brows furrowed slightly. Claire noticed his noticing. Her grip on him tightened. She was losing control. so she talked faster, louder, more emotionally, the way manipulators do when they sense their power slipping. She tried to pull Ethan into the kitchen, away from me, but he gently pulled his arm free and walked toward me instead. And that moment, that simple decision, shattered her confidence completely. She followed us urgently, trying to insert herself between us. But Ethan ignored her. He sat beside me, concern touching his expression as he asked if I needed anything. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the boy I raised, the man I had always believed in, the son who had been temporarily blinded but never lost. Then I handed him the folder. His fingers hesitated on the cover. Claire froze. Her eyes widened with something that finally resembled fear. She knew, without opening a single page, that everything inside that folder was hers. Her lies. Her words. Her greed. Her plans. Her crimes. The silence in the room was so heavy it felt thick. Ethan opened the folder slowly. And as the first page turned, everything Claire built began to crumble. Everything she planned began to collapse. Everything she believed she controlled slipped out of her hands. This was the moment I stopped protecting her with silence. This was the moment she learned exactly who I was. Not senile. Not fragile. Not naive. Just a mother who finally decided to fight back. The moment Ethan opened the folder, it felt as if time in the house thickened. Claire stood completely still, her face frozen in a half-smile that slipped inch by inch as she realized I wasn't the one who had been blind all along, she was. Ethan flipped through the first few pages, his eyes scanning slowly, then faster, then stopping entirely when he reached the forged signatures. His shoulders tensed. His breathing grew shallow. The weight of betrayal, not mine, but his, pressed into the room like a storm about to break. Claire tried to speak first. Manipulators always do. They rush to fill silence before truth has time to breathe. She stammered excuses, accusations, desperate justifications. She waved her hands as if she could scatter the evidence like dust. She insisted everything was a misunderstanding, a miscommunication, an exaggeration. She spoke too fast, tripping over her own stories, contradicting herself with every frantic sentence. But Ethan didn't look at her. Not once. He kept his eyes on the pages, the recordings, the transcripts, the credit statements, the fraudulent forms, the nursing home admission files stamped with dates she swore she never touched. I watched the moment he realized that the woman he married had been planning not only to manipulate him, but to erase me entirely. It struck him deeply. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was personal. It was an attack on his trust, his kindness, his humanity. When he finally lifted his head, there were no words in his expression, just devastation. Claire reached for him, but he stepped back. That single movement, a simple step away, was the most powerful shift I had ever seen in my son. It was the moment he chose truth over facade. It was the moment he saw Claire without filters, without excuses, without the charm she used like perfume. The confrontation was quiet. Not explosive. Not theatrical. Quiet in the way heartbreak always is. Quiet like something breaking inside a person with such precision that the sound feels almost sacred. By the time Ethan told her to leave, Claire looked nothing like the confident woman who once declared she would own this house soon. She looked small. Panicked. Cornered. And yet, even then, she tried to blame me. She tried to weaponize guilt. She tried to turn Ethan against me in one final desperate attempt. But it was useless. He had seen the truth. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. That night, after she stormed out, the house felt both emptier and lighter. Ethan sat beside me at the kitchen table, staring at his hands. He apologized over and over, as if he had personally orchestrated everything she did. I told him the same thing each time, he was not responsible for someone else's poison. Manipulators thrive in shadows. They twist love into chains. They prey on empathy. Claire had done all of that, wrapping him so tightly in obligation and guilt that he couldn't see the strings she was pulling. But now the strings were cut. The next morning, Claire returned with rage instead of remorse. She pounded on the door demanding explanations, shouting accusations through the wood, threatening consequences she no longer had the power to deliver. She tried to force her way back into a house that was never hers. Ethan didn't open the door. He simply handed her a written notice through the small entry window, prepared by Grant, informing her of the legal actions being taken. She went silent for a moment, stunned. Then came the meltdown that revealed who she truly was. Her words were sharp, ugly, unfiltered. She insulted me, threatened Ethan, cursed the world, blamed everyone but herself. But every word, every scream, every insult only confirmed that the mask she'd worn for so long had finally shattered. Within a week, consequences began catching up to her. Her bank accounts were flagged for fraud. Her job terminated her after seeing evidence of identity theft committed using workplace resources. The nursing home she had spoken to filed their own report upon learning she lied about my medical condition. And the credit cards she opened under my name were frozen and placed under investigation. Claire didn't collapse dramatically, she crumbled slowly, painfully, publicly. Manipulators are not built for accountability. They are built only for control. And when control is taken away, they break. Meanwhile, Ethan stayed by my side through every meeting, every document signing, every step of the legal process. He didn't miss a single appointment. He didn't let me face anything alone. If there was guilt left in him, he channeled it into protection, into understanding, into relearning who I truly was beyond Claire's invented narrative. And something beautiful happened. My son returned to me. Not physically, emotionally. The version of him she had dimmed resurfaced. The humor. The gentleness. The sincerity. He spoke to me differently. He listened more. He lingered near me the way children do when they feel safe. The bond that Claire had quietly poisoned was being rebuilt through small moments, simple conversations, shared meals that no longer felt tense or staged. Months passed, and the case moved slowly through the legal system. Claire negotiated a plea deal, avoiding prison but accepting financial restitution, a restraining order, and mandatory monitoring of her financial activity. Her reputation collapsed. Her social circle vanished. She became a cautionary tale whispered about in the same community she once bragged to. I didn't celebrate her downfall. Not because I pitied her, but because victory doesn't always feel like triumph. Sometimes victory feels like peace. Like breathing freely in your own home again. Like hearing your son laugh without strain. Like walking into your kitchen without waiting for an insult. Like knowing the evenings belong to comfort instead of tension. Justice is not loud. It is steady. One quiet morning, Ethan brought me 2 envelopes, one from the district attorney confirming the case closure, and one handwritten letter from Claire. He asked me if I wanted him to throw it away. I told him no. I wanted to read it myself. Not out of curiosity, but out of closure. Later, alone in my room, I opened her letter. It was exactly what I expected, apologies shaped like excuses, regret shaped like manipulation, pity disguised as reflection. She blamed stress, childhood trauma, finances, misunderstandings. She asked for forgiveness without offering accountability. She wanted sympathy, not redemption. I folded the letter in half and placed it in the drawer with old receipts, meaningless paper, nothing more. I had reclaimed my peace. That evening, Ethan sat beside me on the porch as the sun dipped behind the trees. The air was warm, the breeze gentle. He told me how grateful he was that I fought back. How ashamed he felt for not seeing the truth sooner. How proud he was of my strength. I told him the truth gently, strength doesn't roar. It endures. It observes. It waits for the right moment. He looked at me with a softness I hadn't seen since he was a boy. Then he said something that made my heart settle gently into place. You never needed saving, Mom. But I did. And he was right. Claire hadn't just tried to steal my home. She had tried to steal him. But in the end, she lost everything, and I gained back the one person she never deserved to influence. I wasn't senile. I wasn't fragile. I wasn't helpless. I was simply quiet. Quiet enough for her to reveal exactly who she was. Quiet enough for the truth to build. Quiet enough for justice to find its way through. And in the end, it wasn't my silence she needed to fear. It was what my silence allowed me to see.